Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Dina Nichols, and I'm here today with a roundtable discussion with our guest, Siobhan Costello Weber, who is running for Select Board. And with us as well are Danny Cobb and Thomas Bodden. So thank you guys for both being here.
Thanks.
The objective with our time together today is really, it's actually prompted by you, Siobhan. You typically, you have the opportunity to have sort of a Q&A as you're running for office, and you had specifically asked me if you could change it up a bit and have more for community engagement, have folks from town come to chat a little bit, ask questions, find out more about you. And full disclosure, there's no sort of pre-work that's been done here. There's no questions that have been prepared in advance. I mean, it's a very informal roundtable discussion. And so maybe we could start by you telling us a little bit about yourself and why you are running today.
Sure, yeah. So thank you, Dina, for hosting, and Danny and Tom for coming, and of course SMC for hosting us. Glad to be back in the studio again. I haven't ever been here, and now twice in a week, so that's exciting. So as Dina mentioned, I really wanted to invite some people from our community as a demonstration of my commitment to community engagement. And I think anyone who's talked to me so far about the campaign or talked to anyone, as Dina and Danny and Tom are, fortunately, have pledged their support. You'll know that I really care a lot about closing the feedback loop, or in other words, making communication more of a two-way street and a back and forth. And that's the other reason why this isn't scripted, because I certainly want to have the audience learn as much as they can about me. But a key reason why I'm running is because in the last several years, I've seen a lot of opportunity to close that feedback loop, right? I think that the current town leadership has done a really good job of trying to improve the channels of communication, right? So we have a beautiful new website. There are lots of areas where information gets posted, right, and shared out, and that's a wonderful thing. For communication to really be effective and actionable, in my experience, it needs to be both ways. So that is really critical to me. Super happy that you're here. I moved to town about 8 years ago, and I was at the time in a very, very demanding corporate job, little kids, 5 of them under 10, and just kind of put my head down and thought, all right, well, this is an awesome community. I'm grateful to be here. I moved around a ton as a kid. So I was like, I have a house, I have a yard, I have a town. This is it. I've made it, right? I'm doing great. And so I just focused on that for a good long time. And then when the commute started killing me, and I realized I didn't have time for, the charities I wanted to be involved in, not as much time for my family. About 5 years ago, I transitioned into a career locally, where I can set my own schedule. I'm an independent contractor. So now I live and I work in town. My boys are in school. And I really feel I've been a bit remiss in not getting involved before now. I think realistically, this is probably the first moment in time I probably could have achieved it. So I look at it as kind of serendipitous that it's coming together at this particular point in time, where our community does need, in my opinion, change. And change isn't bad, by the way. I'm not saying that I'm running because I'm better, right, necessarily than the other candidates, but I do think I'm different. And I think that it's a necessary difference at this point in our town's evolution. We're not the same community that we were even 8 years ago when I moved here, or 30 years ago, or you grew up here, right? So we all know a bit of a different Shrewsbury, and I just want that diversity of background and breadth and depth of experience to be another voice on the board. So that's a little bit about me, and I'd love to hear from you guys, your thoughts.
Well, by way of introduction, my name's Danny Cobb. My wife Janet and I moved here, got married and moved to Shrewsbury all in 1985, so coming up on 40 years now. Doesn't seem like that much time has passed. We've seen a lot happen in the town. Virtually every school get built and rebuilt and things like that. Cycles of projects, and we've largely been the beneficiaries of and enjoyed all of them. So love the town, love what it's done for us. Raised 2 great children here. I call them children. They're now in their 30s, so Shrewsbury got them off to a good start. And just looking forward to this discussion with you today.
Great, thank you, Danny.
Tom?
My name is Tom Bodden. I have, as Dina or as Siobhan mentioned, I grew up in town. I still live in town. I went to Patton Elementary School and then Floral and then Sherwood and Oak and through Shrewsbury High School. And I, after high school, got started my career in commercial real estate and was just brought back to Shrewsbury. I think there's a lot of great things here. I played sports in town. I was gonna say, for anyone that thinks that there's a script here, this is the second time I've met Siobhan in person. I only just met her Thursday, so but really felt that you had a lot of great things to say, and so I'm and you have I feel like the wherewithal to do what needs to be done, and so just excited to talk some more about it.
Great, thank you.
Well, one of the nice things I think about this group is that it sort of crosses the spectrum, and I've known you for 3 years, probably 3 or 4 years, professionally. So, and always been very, very impressed, particularly by your intellect and your efficiency at getting things done. Stuff. No, but I'm being honest. And so I was thrilled to hear that you were, when you mentioned that you were toying with the idea based on the conversations we had over the past years, the time I've known you, I was thrilled to see you step up and step in the way that you did. It's a big leap. I mean, as you've said, trying to find that place in terms of where you go, how you get, what door you open for yourself. I think it's the right one. I absolutely think it's the right one. So I'm very excited for that. But turning back to both Danny and to Tom, I know you've had some experiences. You've been poking around with some things that have been important to you. And maybe you could take a few minutes just to ask Siobhan a few questions about things that you think are important and should be important for our next select board member.
Thank you for the opportunity to do that. I mentioned, being the happy beneficiaries of just about everything that's gone on in town. I like to tell people we were the perfect taxpayers, right? We were generally for just about everything that happened, every bonding event and override and things like that had to happen. We sent our kids to parochial school, so we weren't consuming one of those precious seats in the town schools. So perfect taxpayers from that perspective. And it's largely really happy and frankly proud and impressed with what was happening here. For the past 5 or 6 years, that feeling has changed, and part of it you're midway through that, you go through COVID and things like that. So I'm sure that's a disruption to any culture, that's existed. But if I could put my finger on just one thing, I'd say that we've gone from being able to sort of move through a series of projects that have to happen and get renewed and move forward and things like that, follow a plan and follow a strategy, to something that feels much more chaotic and feels like there are some surprises. It feels like it's a bit ad hoc. I know we have a strategic plan. I'm a big believer in having a strategic plan so that you can use it as your North Star to guide you going forward. It doesn't feel like we're doing that. I feel like people can agree with the strategy, but they have no insight or visibility into the actual implementation of that right now. And it's disenfranchising when I talk to people, and I think that's the feeling that's crept into my way of thinking the past 5 or 6 years. So with that as a backdrop, you've been talking to a lot of people in town. You've been knocking on a lot of doors. You probably have more to knock on this evening after we leave here. What are you hearing? What are you feeling? What are people saying to you?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So it's very interesting. I've had to coach myself to stay at the door and not get welcomed inside for a cup of tea because I'm fascinated by everyone's stories. And I made that mistake early on. I said, sure, I'll come for a cup of tea. And an hour and a half later, your daughter did what? Your sister, then what did she do, right? Oops, I made it to one house. So, I would say in general, I've just been really overwhelmed with how welcoming everyone's been to actually open their door and have a conversation. So I do think that speaks to not only our strengths as a community and our willingness to have that conversation, but also that people are hungry to have conversation, right? They want to tell somebody how they're feeling. And I've gotten lots of questions about fundamental, town services, some of which the answers are available online, right? But it's not the way they need or want to access the information. So even though in some cases these are questions that can be answered with current data, there's a disconnect, and how do I get to it? And then there are other questions where we don't even quite know how we got here. So, for example, I've gotten a lot of questions, and actually this is one of the breadcrumbs that eventually brought me to the seat right here, was, existing assets, right? Building usage. So we have, for example, we have a building in town now that is structurally viable, right? There's nothing wrong with it. And we're tearing it down because it was part of the plan to tear it down. And that kind of thinking, to your point about, making shorter term decisions that may have negative downstream impact, that kind of thinking is a concern for me. And other people are seeing it too, which was validating, right? I thought, because you start to think, am I making this up? Right? Am I, out of left field? And I heard a lot of that echoed. I have to tell you, though, without a doubt, the most vocal, the most heartbreaking, I mean, honestly, is talking to our seniors. I've had them cry on their front porch that they can't retire. I've had them be very, very visibly upset about the fear that they can't stay in their town where they have been 30, 40 years, they've raised their children. And these people understand that Shrewsbury, comparatively speaking, has a lower tax rate, right, compared to the surrounding towns. So it's not so much that the notion of paying more, right, conceptually is a problem, but when you're on a fixed income and when your tax rate and your property values at the same time, that's like a double whammy for people whose income is not keeping pace, right, with their expenses. And that literally is a forcing mechanism for people to get out of their homes. And then when you look at our bylaws, okay, well, what are alternative housing opportunities or affordable housing opportunities where we can keep these people in our community? And it's not just our seniors, it's younger people who might want to settle here. How can they afford to do that when a starter home is between $400 and $450 for a basic, ranch or cape in town? And the fact is, a lot of times they can't, right? And then they're stuck feeling like, well, I have to sell to get my equity, and now I have to go and pay even less advantageous tax rate somewhere else for maybe a rental or, a style of accommodation that they're not used to. That's not okay with me. I don't claim to sit here today and have like the silver bullet solution to that, right? It's a complicated problem. But I do feel like we could be doing more to reflect that feedback in our thinking and make it actionable through our long-term strategic plan, right? One of the current select board members, I was talking to him the other day, and he has said publicly in select board meetings, right? A strategic plan is only good as long as it's actionable. And that's the piece that I think that we're feeling is like the missing piece. So, I think that the seniors really, truly have been, their feedback's been devastating, if I can really be honest with you.
In what you say makes great sense because we have seen both of those things. Tax rates creep up a little bit, they go down a little bit, but I think it's more even just the emotional connection. The fact that they're at that point of feeling desperate, despite maybe best efforts on some cases, to address it. So just recognizing that and having the sensitivity to say, let's see what we can do, as you say, community engagement goes back to that again. Yeah. So yourself, tell me, what would you say, Tom?
There's a couple things that come to my mind when thinking about the town and what I like and what I don't like, and I think that all of us are here because we like the town of Shrewsbury. I think that there's a lot to offer. There's a lot of advantages. There's a lot of great things. Myself, although I wasn't paying the taxes for it, I got to reap the benefits of a lot of great things in town. Play baseball at Dean Park, and go to the schools and stuff. So
You're welcome.
thank you all.
And thank your parents. Wasn't your mom like a linchpin in the Dean Park project?
Yeah, I was gonna say yeah. Well, and that's another thing. My mom was involved with school committee for a while, and she also was played a pretty significant role in the Dean Park playground development and stuff. And so that was also great for me. And my brother did his Eagle Scout project there. But anyways, so I think we all stay here because we like the town. It has a lot to offer. That being said, I think that there still definitely is some untapped or unfound opportunity. and perhaps to go off of the residential tax situation, but I think bringing new businesses to town, and and some may say I'm biased because I'm in the business, but I'm also biased because I'm a young person looking to do things in town. And right now there's some great things, but I feel like our center of town is it's not as great as it can be. It's very pretty, but it might be great to have more things to do there. And so what are your thoughts about attracting new businesses to the town, and perhaps bolstering some existing projects that we have to make it better? And
yeah, that's a great question. I know that's one that has been cropping up a lot, any kind of development, right? What we're hearing from the larger developers is that, and this is a pretty common storyline, right? I can't make the commercial component work without the residential. So you need to give me all kinds of residential units to supply the foot traffic, to feed the business, and that's our virtuous cycle, and that's how we make money, right? That is true. That is how they make money, right? But if you are running this town, right, and we have assets in the form of commercial space, or whether it's in private hands or not, we attract outside business typically through tax incentives, right? And I'm not necessarily, just as a blanket statement against that, and a lot of them are provided by the state, not necessarily out of the Shrewsbury budget. So that's wonderful. I would love for them to have incentives baked in to come to our town. What I really want to see, though, are two things. One is more of a rise of local small business. So as an independent contractor, and I work for a brokerage that is a small business, woman-owned in town, we connect with all kinds of small businesses as part of our charity work because they're our primary sponsors, right? It's not Whole Foods, and I love Whole Foods, but it's not them sponsoring us, right? It's our local insurance agents and our waste collectors and our attorneys. And these are the people who show up to our events, who fill baskets for the homeless and backpacks for children in foster care, and provide gift cards for raffles to raise money to rescue animals who are in terrible situations. I mean, these are the kinds of things that we get ourselves involved in. And a key reason why I switched careers, so I could have time to do all of that.
Yeah.
And I think that when you engage small businesses, again, people who live and or work here, we have people who own businesses here who don't live here, but they still feed our economy and they feed our community, right, in a lot of different ways. And so I would like to see some incentives for them to continue to expand their footprint, and it doesn't have to be as town vendors necessarily, but just within the scheme of our existing space and what commercial opportunities are available. I would like to see that go back to local a little bit more, and I think that by doing that we can really more decouple the commercial from all of the apartment rental-based residential space, because there's people who already have a network here, a framework here, and a customer base here, right? And so that to me goes back to leveraging the assets that we already have on hand before trying to go invest in new ones, right? And going back to strategic planning, I mean, there are some key elements to it, and that's one of them, where you start with, okay, well, here's the end state, right? Here's what success looks like to us, and here's what it feels like, and here are all the words that we associated with it. And then you have to reverse engineer that into actionable next steps and plans, and then you have to execute and measure them to know if you're doing well or if you need to change something. And that's where I think we have to tighten up the interwoven, interconnected nature of some of these projects, because if we're giving up dozens or hundreds of residential units to get a little bit of commercial space, is that a good deal for us? Dollar for dollar on a tax basis, we make more as a town on a commercial dollar than we do on a residential dollar. Right. So the balance, absolutely, in my opinion, needs to shift. And much more, that's what people want, right? It's not about any one project in the town center. I have yet to meet a single person who hasn't said, I want a vibrant, walkable, down. No one's saying, I'll let it rot. Right? No, we want it to be awesome. Right. And we don't want to sit at that light forever. Right? I need to get to Assabet, and I can't get there from here. Granted, I won't have to get there much longer, but we don't have time for that tonight. So, I think that it's about continuing those connections, engaging them. They're part of the community. So engaging the community, well, what do you need, small business owner, to be successful here? What are you not getting? How are you not heard? And whether it's residents or commercial, from an engagement standpoint, I'm committed just frankly to doing things differently. So because I don't have a similar background, I don't have similar boundaries, right? I'm not going to think, well, that can't be done or it hasn't been done that way. I'm going to think, what we should try? So you know what we should try? I think we should try, or I should try, if I'm lucky enough to be elected, having open office hours. I think if I'm lucky enough to be elected, maybe I can snag one of my fellow select people on a rotational basis to go meet the community for coffee twice a month as a group, town hall style. Let's just talk it out. What's going on with you? Because what I'm hearing from people is that I'm not being heard. And what I'm hearing from the town is we're trying really hard. And I think they are trying really hard. But there's this abyss kind of in the middle where the information's not making it over and the feedback's not getting over here. And a lot of folks have, talked about the public comment period or having meeting space and time to be able to do that. Listen, I have 5 kids, and when they all get going, you have to have guardrails, especially on meetings that are supposed to be productive, right? So I'm not saying that, we should just have it be a free-for-all and everybody can come in. But if you give people other outlets, and these are just 2 ideas I have, then they have a channel to reach you and they can communicate with you. And if nothing else, even if I can't give you a solution and say, here you go, I fixed your problem, have a nice day, you can at least go home and say, my local leader cares about me and they hear me. And I think that's the minimum of what we can do for our residents and our taxpayers.
Well, you did open the door a bit on the schools. So
I did.
You did.
I've got a lot of kids in them.
I know you do. I know you do. And so mentioning Assabet,
Yes.
what are your thoughts, given the fact that Assabet no longer will be able to be a resource or an alternative for our students?
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, my oldest son is a junior at Assabet. Thankfully, he gets to stay and finish out his time there. My younger 4, a couple of whom I really had high hopes of going there. Of course, we're going to have to find an alternative, right? So I think in the short term, it is very complicated, right? It costs millions of dollars, as we all know, to build a new school, and certainly a trade school that has specialty labs and equipment and training and staffing. It's a complicated thing. What I'd like to see, and it's not just with education, but I will say that this change in mass legislation that put us in this situation, right, of saying, I'm sorry, Assabet, you can only fill seats from in district before you go out of district. Well, there you go, they're full, right? And they will continue to be full, just like the Worcester VOTEC has a wait list and is always full. Wait list means you're not getting in, right? I mean, that's just what it means. And so I would like to see the out of district communities that are affected by this band together. And there are, unfortunately, I haven't seen or heard much of it from our town leadership, not to say it's not happening, but I have talked to several just residents locally with quite diverse backgrounds who are fighting this for our students at the state level to try to get the funding, the attention, some assistance on what's the short-term path for our students while we figure out something more sustainable. And something more sustainable may not be building a brand new school, because we all know the costs and downstream effects that are associated with that. But when I was in the last select board meeting and I heard them talking about a potential addition to the high school and, oh, by the way, maybe we can layer some trade programs in there, I start to get nervous, because when you spread yourself too thin, you're really not doing anything well. And I think these are things that are critical to get right for ourselves and for our community's future. And so that concerns me, and I don't think that's necessarily the right application. But we also don't have to take on the whole problem at once. We have Selco. We have a municipal electric company based in our town. Could we have a lineman apprenticeship? Could we have some kind of real-time on-the-job educational component where we do have resources? I know people, have interned here at SMC before, where we have, and again, engaging those small businesses, right? So if you can feed the small businesses with the community that, start to learn the skills that then feed the small businesses, that's the kind of virtuous cycle that I want to see, not the one that fills the developer's pocket, because that money doesn't stay here.
Right. Well said. Well, I know we're running out of time, to be very honest with you, so I have to be sensitive to that. But do either of you have anything that you wanted to bring up with Siobhan while we still have a few minutes left?
I was gonna say I do have one other question. A lot of times in political campaigns and stuff like that, people are always talking about the changes they want to make, the things they want to do. But back to my original point, I think we're all here, because we like the town. And so, is there anything in particular that you think that the town does well and that you really like, or perhaps things that are almost there and just need to be bolstered to get there? I think there is definitely some change that's needed. But I was gonna say, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Actually, a lot of the changes I want to see are in fact reversions
Right.
to the things we used to be really good at, right? I think we used to be really excellent at balancing strategic investments with short-term revenue and value for a dollar, right? So, and that's a tricky proposition because there are a lot of variables that go into that. But I think that as people are paying more, the perception is, and I think in many times the reality, unfortunately, is they're getting less. Now, things cost more, right? All the time. We have inflation. These are not things that the Shrewsbury Select Board are going to solve for this town or for the country, right? So, but I do think that the things that are within our power can bring us back to the days where our residents feel like we get good value for our money. Maybe we do have to pay more because you know what? Taxes are what you pay to live in a civilized society, right? If you want shared services and a fire department and a police station, you're going to pay your taxes. But if we can keep it reasonable, if we can protect our most vulnerable citizenry, because there's a lot of money in this town, right? And there are lots of people door knocking, depending on the neighborhood, who said, I could even pay more. They don't want to. Nobody wants to, but they could. And that doesn't mean they just should rush out and do it. But there's flexible ways to balance things so that we get back to that feeling. We're not going to be a small farm town, right? Again, but I do think through the community engagement parts I'm talking about, and some of the restructuring of our initiatives, that we can get back to that feeling. That's why I moved here, right? Like I said, I moved around a lot, and I looked at Shrewsbury and I was like, do people know about this?
Right.
This place is great, right? Well, people know. The secret's out. We're all here now, right? So we have to figure out together how to muddle through. Right. But you know what? I do appreciate that. Even if I don't agree with the outcome of the decisions, I do appreciate that it seems like we have a lot of people giving a lot of their time to try to make the community a better place. And we need every single person to be invested at the local level to make this work. Many more than we I was one of them, right? I wasn't engaged at the local level for a really long time. Raising my family, go to work, right? But then you kind of lose the right to complain, right? Unless you're going to step up and do something about it. Right. Then it becomes difficult. So there's a lot I like about the town, but I do think that we've gone a little bit off course, and some fresh blood and fresh direction I think could help round out the skill set in a complementary way that's already existing to bring us into that next generation of Shrewsbury.
Great. Well, thank you. Everything you say is really, I think, encouraging. Heavy subjects. I mean, it's hard. It's a big task in front of whoever's going to step into the role, and certainly you're picking up a lot of support. I would say that. One thing I want to share while we have a couple of seconds is, on a lighter note, last summer you took a van, didn't you? Did you take a cross-country trip with 5 boys and a husband?
I did.
So I just knew that when I was in touch with you, I think in New Mexico, you had...
Oh, yeah. There were times I was doing deals from the top of Bryce Canyon where text was spotty, you couldn't connect a phone call to save your life, and I was like, save the deal.
If anybody could win kudos for being impressive and handling a lot, cross-country in a van with 5 young boys and your husband.
And we're all back and we're all safe.
I know.
We did call it.
Left in Bryce Canyon.
No, I thought about staying, but I didn't.
Anyhow, thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate this. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
And once again, please keep Siobhan Costello Weber in mind on May 2nd when you vote. She would welcome your vote, as would I.
Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.